hey, we got to find somebody who can teach some ethics classes. And Madison replied to Jefferson suggesting George Tucker. This is a really interesting guy. This is like America's first science fiction author. This guy was actually pretty cool. But his main field, scholarly field, was political economy, and he had also been a member of Congress. In fact, he was a member of Congress when Jefferson and Madison approached him about becoming a professor. So Madison replies to Jefferson, "What are the collateral aptitudes of George Tucker, the member of Congress? I have never seen him and can only judge him by a volume of miscellaneous essays published not very long ago. They are written with acuteness and elegance and indicate a capacity and taste for philosophical literature." And now the two candidates that Jefferson was already considering before Madison proposed Tucker were also lawyers. Okay, so it was going to be a lawyer teaching the proofs of the being of God, the creator, preserver, and supreme ruler of the universe, and author of all relations of morality and of the laws and obligations these infer. Get this now. This was bull that Jefferson was putting in these reports to the legislature. He had no intentions of teaching religion at the university, and no religion was ever taught at the university when Jefferson was there. Everything that Barton needs to rely on here is from reports of things that they were maybe gonna do, but these things never actually happened. In the end, they did hire George Tucker, who was the professor of ethics. And they called it the professor of moral philosophy and political economy. That was the religion teacher. And, Tucker was there for like 20 years. When Tucker retired in 1845, the university lost the last of its original professors. It was Tucker's successor, William Holmes McGuffey, like McGuffey readers, who replaced him. And it was McGuffey who was really religious. The McGuffey readers, Barton loves to refer to those because of, you know, religious crap in public schools. It was McGuffey who would play the big role in undermining all the secular policies of Jefferson and Madison. McGuffey was actually a Presbyterian minister, and he was the first minister to be a professor at the university. So it wasn't until like 20 years after Jefferson died that there was a clergyman professor at the university. Oh, okay. More proof that the people who knew Jefferson, who were there when he was founding the university, knew he was founding a secular university. So a couple years after Jefferson died, one of the original professors was going to be leaving. And Chapman Johnson decided that he was going to use that opportunity to try to reverse Jefferson's policy of not having any clergymen as professors. But bearing in mind now that James Madison is still there, so he's got to get it past Madison. So again, I'm just going to read here. But even with Jefferson gone, Johnson knew he would have to get either Joseph Cabell or James Madison to go along. So he wrote to John Hartwell Cockey, who's another board member that Johnson knew would probably side with him, okay, and asked him to work on Cabell. And this is what he writes. This is Chapman Johnson, original Board of Visitors member. Tell Cabell it is time to give up his old prejudice upon this subject, the offspring of the French Revolution, long since a bastard by divorce of the unnatural alliance between liberty and atheism. Okay, so Chapman Johnson, original board member, knew Jefferson was there from the founding. saw the university as not only secular, but the unnatural alliance between liberty and atheism. Johnson also wrote to Madison, apparently trying to trick him into stating his position on hiring clergymen by claiming that he had reason to suspect that a particular candidate for the professorship might be a clergyman. Madison didn't buy this and didn't give Johnson a definite answer. He then listed all the problems that allowing clergymen into the professorships could cause. Madison knew that Johnson was scheming to bring religion into the university by putting clergymen on the faculty, so he ended his letter by making it clear that he wanted religious worship and instruction to be initiated by the students, not the school. And this is where we get to, this is what's allowed in public schools today. Okay, so in 1827, James Madison, his policy was what's allowed today. This is what Madison wrote. I have indulged more particularly the hope that the provision for religious instruction and observances among the students would be made by themselves and their parents or guardians, each contributing to a fund to be applied in remunerating the services of clergymen of denominations corresponding with the preference of contributors. Small contributions would suffice, and the arrangements would become more adequate and more efficient as the students become more numerous. Whilst being altogether voluntary, it would interfere neither with the characteristic peculiarity of the university, the consecrated principle of the law, nor the spirit of the country. So right there, that is proof that at that point, there were no clergymen, there were no chaplains, there was nothing, because Madison is saying right there how he hopes this will happen when it happens. It hasn't happened yet. Okay, he's got a section, did Jefferson bar religious instruction from the academic program? Okay, and again, he's basing this on what Jefferson said in the 1818 Rockfish Report, that they were going to teach, oh, he changed this to, okay, with the languages. For example, he directed the professor of ancient languages to teach biblical Greek. Now, the word biblical isn't to teach Greek, and as I already said, Jefferson wanted Greek and Latin taught to be able to read the classics in those languages. So it's Barton inserting biblical before Greek. Hebrew, which never was taught. Okay, so this next one's interesting because Barton uses it in his new book in relation to the University of Virginia, but in his old book, Original Intent, he used it in relation to Jefferson's plan for education in Virginia from the 1770s, but really actually had to do with neither. In his new book, this is what he writes. In addition to religious instruction given by the professor of ethics and the professor of ancient languages, Jefferson personally ensured that religious study would also be an inseparable part of the study of law and political science. As he explained to a prominent judge, in my catalog, considering ethics as well as religion as supplements to law in the government of man, I had placed them in that sequence. In Original Intent, he says, Barton writes, when Thomas Jefferson authored his plan of education in Virginia, he considered religious study an inseparable component in the study of law and political science. As he explained, in my catalog, considering ethics as well as religion as supplements to law in the government of man, I had placed them in the sequence, the same quote. Okay. What this actually was, Jefferson wrote to Judge Augustus Woodward, okay, and Woodward and Jefferson shared an interest in books and libraries and the cataloging of libraries. This had nothing to do with any plan for any school. This was about Jefferson's own personal library and how it was cataloged. Woodward had developed a system of classification for all the branches of science, which he published in 1816 as a system of universal science. Okay, it's basically a library cataloging system. Now, in the letter quoted by Barton, Jefferson, who had come up with a different system for cataloging his own library, was just explaining to Woodward how he had arrived at what he thought was the proper place for books on religion in his personal library. This is what he wrote. The naturalists, you know, distribute the history of nature into 3 kingdoms or departments: zoology, botany, mineralogy. Ideology or mind, however, occupies so much space in the field of science that we might perhaps erect it into a 4th kingdom or department. But inasmuch as it makes a part of the animal construction only, it would be more proper to subdivide zoology into physical and moral. The latter, including ideology, ethics, and mental science generally, in my catalog, considering ethics as well as religion as supplements to law in the government of man, I had placed them in that sequence. But certainly the faculty of thought belongs to animal history, is an important portion of it, and should therefore find its place. It's Jefferson's talking about the best way to set up a library catalog, and of course any library, including his own, had books on religion. Nothing to do with the University of Virginia. So next, Barton writes, Jefferson also approved of worship on campus, acknowledging, quote, that a building, ellipsis, in the middle of the grounds may be called for in time, in which may be rooms for religious worship. Okay, yeah, this is another thing from one of the early proposals to the legislature, you know, to minimize in their minds that there was going to be no religion allowed on the campus, okay? He later ordered that in the university rotunda, quote, one of its large elliptical rooms on its middle floor shall be used for ellipsis. And I know these whole quotes, I can't remember exactly what Barton's, he's omitting something for some reason here, but it shall be used for religious worship. He further declared that, quote, the students of the university will be free and expected to attend religious, and Barton puts his emphasis, expected to attend religious worship at the establishment of their respective sects. The establishments of their respective sects are those seminaries that never existed. So when Jefferson writes, and again, I think this was over some other later dispute about people attacking the university for being irreligious, so they put something in about the attending religious worship at the establishment of their respective sects. Again, Jefferson, knowing there were never going to be any establishments for these respective sects. So Barton's concluding paragraph of this section, similar to the one of the last section, is, Jefferson took many deliberate steps to ensure that religious instruction was an integral part of academic studies. Clearly, then, the claim that there was no Christian curriculum or instruction at the University of Virginia is demonstrably false and easily disproved by Jefferson's own writings. Well, you just heard Jefferson's own writings. In here, you get a couple of snippets from things, and then Barton's conclusion.